We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
You just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson here, reviewing all things Week 11 in the NFL. But first, a reminder, our friends over at Monkey Knife Fight have a great deal for you because all first-time depositors that put at least $20 into their account while using the promo code PFF will receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. You guys were going to sign up for it anyway, so why not get $40 of value for just $20 and you get the opportunity to turn that 20 into even more money playing daily fantasy and prop games at one of the fastest-growing fantasy sports sites in the USA in Monkey Knife Fight. So go to Monkey Knife Fight, deposit your $20, use the promo code PFF today, and receive your free Edge annual subscription. Sam?
Steven?
Ready to go?
Yes.
Week 11. Let's get into it. Arizona played at Seattle last Thursday night. Seattle bounced back.
Yeah.
Did not get swept by the Cardinals in the division. No. And we were just talking off air. The Seahawks, after a little bit of a downtick, they're going to be sitting pretty in a few weeks as they still get to play the entire NFC East and the Jets. Or three out of the four, yeah. 3 out of the 4 NFC East teams plus the Jets.
That's their next 4 weeks. They should be 11 and, 3 in a month's time, just before Christmas, sitting pretty.
And that's like the funny part about the your all-important MVP race, right? Russ against the Bills in a pretty good matchup, and the Rams in a division matchup is pretty terrible in both games. The worst 2-game stretch of his entire career.
Yeah.
But he's going to build back his MVP case against 4 terrible teams in the next 4 weeks.
He'd probably if you're going to have a blip in your MVP season, he timed it pretty well, right? You probably want to start hot just to get the hype going, just to get the ball rolling, start the snowball. Then you need to have the blip somewhere early enough so that by the time the actual consciousness of MVP rolls around properly, that's out of everybody's mind, right? So he starts off on fire, phenomenal beginning to the season. Now it's like MVP, let Russ cook, all this kind of stuff. Then you have 2 stinkers. But then by the time everyone's voting, no one will remember those games because you just went 4-0 against the NFC East and the Jets, put up 1 million points, and it's, Russ has been cooking like this all season long.
Yeah.
Except those 2 games.
He never had a bad game.
Right.
The best part about those blips for Russ and the MVP hype is that they didn't happen in prime time, so nobody actually saw them. One was at 1 o'clock against the Bills. Nobody saw that, especially on the West Coast. They were sleeping still. And then it happened against the Rams at 4 o'clock. There was 6 other games that day, right? I mean, it was like, whatever. Russ didn't even have bad games. He had a 90.9 passing grade against Arizona. Really only missed 1 throw.
Yeah.
Was just very efficient. And they ran the ball a little bit more, but not really. Russ scrambled around a little bit more. I thought Arizona did a nice job at least containing some of the big plays. But Wilson, I thought, played a patient game when things weren't there early, scrambled around and made plays, but, in an under control fashion. So important game for the Seahawks to win that. Against the Cardinals, Kyler Murray got banged up, a little AC joint. You ever tried to throw with a banged up AC joint, Sam?
Probably, on the basis of my shoulder's been iffy for a decade now, and if I throw sometimes you can feel it. So I'm going to assume that's the same.
I had a random AC joint pain. I mean, you just can't lift your arm
above
your shoulder,
right.
Really. Just all
We can all relate.
Pinches. So very relatable to Kyler Murray and what he had to deal with Thursday night. He battled it out, but left a few plays on the table. Seahawks defense came correct. Number 43, rushing off the edge, Carlos Dunlap sealed the deal with the sack. Seahawks' best 2 pass rushers, number 33, Jamal Adams, and number 43, Carlos Dunlap. That screws up protection.
Jamal Adams leads the team in pressures by some distance, and he's A, a safety, and B, he's missed a lot of time this season.
It's really crazy.
It is absurd.
The defense stepped up, in that game and everything, and they were really banged up. Corners were all hurt. DJ Reed starting at corner got picked on at times. I thought Arizona could have attacked him a little bit more. How about this memory, by the way? This is from last Thursday night.
I think what this game showed me is that the Seahawks, if Russell Wilson is playing like the best quarterback in the NFL, are a contender. They're good enough to beat pretty much anybody. But that's the razor's edge they're walking. Like, if Wilson isn't playing like an MVP, Seattle is kind of in trouble because that's when all the other flaws suddenly show up. And the thing is, we're not going to think about that for the next month because they're going to walk over the NFC East and the Jets, right? So we're going to roll into like Christmas time. The Seahawks are going to look like one of the best teams in football. Russell Wilson's going to be flying, and everyone's like, look, the Seahawks, Super Bowl contenders. They're going to be tough to knock off in the NFC. And it's like, they haven't played anybody for like a month and a half. And like, if Russell Wilson teeters just a little bit, that defense is probably still garbage. Like, there's a lot of problems on this roster still.
So in the NFC West, it was a 3-way tie coming into the week. Seahawks, Cardinals, and Rams. Rams still play tonight.
Yeah.
If they win, technically they will be in first with the tiebreaker over the Seahawks. If the Rams do lose to the Bucs on the road, the Seahawks take control of the division. The Saints, who we'll talk about in a minute, have the number 1 seed at the moment, but I think they're walking a little bit of a tighter line with Taysom Hill at quarterback. We'll talk about it. But yeah, you're right. The Seahawks play the Eagles, the Giants, the Jets, the Washington football team, and then they finish up with a rematch against the Rams and the 49ers. So very easily should go 5-1.
Even if the Rams
could go 6-0 and be the number 1 seed.
Even if the Rams lose control of their own division, they of course still lead the NFC East as a nice consolation prize.
They do. The NFC East still up for grabs to one of any of 12 teams around the league who will likely sweep them. So it was a huge game for Seattle, and they stepped up 28-21 on Thursday night football. Let's get into that Saints game. Saints and Falcons. Falcons coming off a bye. My biggest takeaway, I know the Taysom thing, and we'll discuss his play in a minute, but the Saints defense, man, making a statement in these last few weeks. Of course, they demoralized the Bucs a few weeks ago. Yes, it was Nick Mullins in the 49ers, but they only gave up 13 against them. They've only given up 25 points over the last 3 games. That includes games against the Bucs and the Falcons. Falcons in a dome. Falcons offense that had been rolling. I know Julio was banged up and all this stuff, but the Saints just getting after it against Matt Ryan. But it's both. It's the coverage unit and the pass rush working together. I'm very impressed with their defense.
And did it without Marshawn Lattimore.
Janoris Jenkins with a monster game.
Yeah, which does happen every now and again. Like, Jenkins is that's why the defense has become the defense we thought it would be heading into the season, right? It looked like a Super Bowl caliber championship defense on paper. And one of the reasons is, look, Janoris Jenkins is capable of having number 1 cornerback games, right?
Xavier Howard, right?
Yeah, where he shuts down anybody is a match for the best receivers in the NFL. It's just they don't come around that often, and the baseline is not great. But as a number 2, that baseline's fantastic because every now and again he can have one of those number 1 cornerback games and change the game for you. So he just managed to time one of those games for a really useful moment because Marshawn Lattimore wasn't there, and he got to step into that role. Not just like there was no drop-off, but he actually massively outperformed him because it was high-end Janoris game.
Yeah, they just, sometimes defenses just look like they're playing at a different speed. I think the Bucs defense has had elements of this throughout the year where it's like, all right, they're just flying around. That is the Saints in recent weeks. Janoris was everywhere. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson making a ton of plays as well. And the 2 linebackers grading well in coverage, Quan Alexander, Demario Davis. Impressed with what Nollins has been doing on the defensive side of the ball.
How can you start this game talking about their defense?
This
is the Taysom Hill game.
That was my takeaway.
No. Stop
defense.
it. Stop it right now. This is the Taysom Hill referendum game.
I was going to segue to that perfectly.
And you come in here talking about their defense.
Yeah. defense was legit.
Stop it.
All
Stop
right.
it now. This is
All right.
Taysom Hill time.
Talk about Taysom.
God, it's fun, isn't it?
It's
I don't even
different.
care whether it's good or bad. It's just great to watch. That's my takeaway. And it kind of was heading into it. Like, everybody's just this, it's disgusting. We're starting this tight end, this guy who's never thrown a pass before. Like, what are we doing here?
He was a quarterback.
It's like, it's fun. Like,
The
why?
fantasy community.
Why would you not love to watch Taysom Hill?
Do you have a take on the fantasy community being up in arms
Generally?
all week?
Because he was listed as a tight end in ESPN or something?
Yes.
No, I honestly, I can't even articulate how little I care about that.
Well, there's. I kind of want your take here. There was
I don't have one.
a moral discussion.
A moral discussion.
Yeah, it became a moral thing.
Wow.
I saw fantasy analysts called out because they were trying to take the high road, saying you can't start a quarterback who's listed as a tight end. There were other people. You would have loved it. There were other people saying, you play the game. If he's listed as a tight end, he's a tight end. You steal the free QB stats, right? Some people took the moral high ground and refused to start him at tight end.
Well, those people are idiots. That's my first take.
You just play the game, right?
Yes.
Like, part of the reason why Taysom Hill's only on your team.
I mean, look, I have
this day, right?
I have a degree of sympathy for the concept of certain unwritten rules, but this clearly isn't one of them.
Now, how should fantasy folks, how should the position eligibility be handled?
I don't understand why you wouldn't. Why
would you
did not-
lose tight end status at some point?
Yeah, like this point where they name him starting quarterback. Surely,
So perhaps ESPN could have pivoted.
yes,
And made him a quarterback.
that would be my suggestion.
I'm just glad we finally got your take on that. I was curious.
Anyway, what did you think you look like as a quarterback starting in this game for the New Orleans Saints instead of Jameis?
See, I think the thing about the Taysom Hill experience, it's kind of like, let's go back to our Lamar discussion coming
The
out.
Mormon Cam Newton.
What's that?
The Mormon Cam Newton.
The Mormon Cam
Right
Newton,
down to being the same age.
as you texted me. I mean, Taysom Hill was in Matt Barkley's recruiting class, I believe.
God.
Just throwing that out there. So I think you have
I joked about, like, when I sent the text, I was like, down to being the same age, and I meant that as a joke, and then looked it up, and they're like separated by a year.
Yeah.
Like, they're basically the same age.
I think you have to look at it through the lens of how we handled Lamar coming out, saying, look, the actual accuracy isn't great. Taysom, I think the internal clock is not great. Right?
So-
his timing is not great.
Honestly, I don't think his accuracy's bad.
No, I'm
As
not
long
talking
as
about
you don't need the deep ball.
I'm talking
That's
about
questionable.
the difference with Taysom, I think, is just general timing and just whatever the awkwardness is with his throwing motion. You have to assume that the overall package of having Taysom out there in the run threat and the play action threat and all that stuff is going to create more open throws. So that immediately makes things look different from the Drew Brees experience, and it's just different.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was some success there. I just think a big chunk of his stats are like a 15-yard. I said 10, you said 15. 15-yard underthrown deep ball where Emmanuel Sanders comes back and gets it and all that stuff. I mean, there's some luck in there.
I don't understand why he can't throw the ball deep. Like, that ball, what did I say it traveled? 55 yards in the air, and it was underthrown by like 15 clean yards. There was a second one later in the game they got nullified that was as bad. And that one was going to end up as a touchdown. Like, the guy came back to it, got the ball, and like stumbled his way into the end zone. Because it's not like he doesn't have an arm, right? Like, there is some serious zip on the underneath stuff and the intermediate stuff.
Agreed.
And can do it off platform. The things that he can do up to 20 yards doesn't connect with those deep passes. I think there's something wrong with the way he's throwing those balls, in addition to the fact that he also seems to have a Joe Flacco level of delay in when he puts them in the air. I don't know if he's seeing it late or if he's just not throwing it until he believes the guy's wide the hell open, but he's putting the ball in the air way too late on those deep shots. But also the ball isn't traveling as far as it should.
I think everything is just a tick late. I think that's a big. I mean, that's what's going to look different. I don't want to go the other way with this. The same way we talk about Big Ben and say, don't judge Big Ben because Duck Hodges was so bad. We can't judge Taysom Hill's timing,
Right,
because
Drew Brees is absurd.
Literally on the other end of the spectrum with
But
with timing and accuracy and everything. So
there's a group of people out there, a lot of people, that are generally disgusted about the entire notion of Taysom Hill as a starting quarterback and think there's no way this guy can function. It's a joke. It's pathetic. There's no, like, why would you start him over Taysom or over Jameis rather? Can we at least acknowledge that this worked, that Sean Payton has a right, and honestly, I think this is at least 30% of the motivation for the entire thing. He has a right on this Monday morning to be smug and to be like, told you.
I love that he is legit being smug and retweeting the doubters, retweeting the haters. I love that.
I think at least 30% of this entire exercise is him trying to prove that he was right about this.
We've been back and forth on the Taysom Hill thing, saying we don't necessarily get it. It doesn't. On the surface, it doesn't feel like it's going to work. But there's a big part of me that was like, if Sean Payton is really believing all of this stuff, and we've seen 12 throws from Taysom Hill in his career. I mean, a few more than that, but like 15. Legitimately, we've seen nothing.
15 when lined up as a quarterback,
right,
including the playoffs. Heading into this
there was
game.
A part of me that thought, okay, Sean Payton is seeing this, like he's not going to really tie his job and his reputation to a guy that is really bad at practice. So at some point you have to.
But you've seen practice. Like, he's not seeing anything. You know what I mean? Like, they're not giving him enough reps to convince him either way.
Yeah, but in training camp and the preseason, I'm not saying like practice during the 20-week season.
But even then, like, how many do you think he gets over the course of an entire
preseason
training
and everything
camp?
Enough. Let me just go back to this. There was the game in the preseason. There's a couple games in the preseason where they put it into his hands.
Yes.
And it looked good. Right. And look, we go the opposite. Like, we don't go by peaks, don't go by like just the best that you've seen. But with Taysom, I feel like I needed to see that. If he was just a whole bunch of gimmick plays and mediocre preseason performances, he had one or two preseason performances where it was like, we're going to run the full offense, we're going to throw the ball with you, only missed like 2 throws the entire time in the whole first half. He was incredible. It's the preseason, but you have to see something. And that's what we saw. Then he's at least shown that he could do it.
There are quarterbacks that we'll get to later who we've seen a lot of evidence that they cannot function at this level. There really wasn't that evidence for Taysom Hill. It was more an absence of evidence that he can do it either way, right? But his college grading wasn't terrible. Now, it wasn't great, which you would like to see from a college prospect, but it wasn't bad. We haven't really seen him attempt passes in anger in terms of like actual design quarterback play in the regular season. And his preseason grades were good. They were like 10 points higher than his regular passing grade. Now, okay, it's preseason, so you have to factor that in, right? It's vanilla defenses. It should be better. But like, that's as close as we've seen from him in terms of being given actual quarterback play, and it was good. And then his first start, was better than that. Like, Taysom Hill right now, my thing has always been, I wrote a piece in the offseason, right? Like, can a Taysom Hill offense function in the NFL?
PFF.com.
My conclusion was that, yes, it can. There's no reason from everything we've seen from him across all areas to say that this cannot be successful, particularly with what we've seen from Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, that's fallen off a bit, which didn't help the argument. But my conclusion was sort of, yes, I think that if anybody can do this, Sean Payton can design an offense around this guy that still functions at a high level and will be successful. I don't know why, though. Like, why would you bother? Like, if you can do that for Taysom Hill, would you not just get the next Taysom Hill in the upcoming draft for a fraction of the price and a guy who's 21 instead of 30?
I think all the stuff that we don't necessarily believe in, Taysom Hill has, which is the it factor, and he was the punt protector, and he's kickoff guy, and he's making backside cutoffs as an H-back. Like, all of that stuff is kind of rolled into this as well.
Steve Young 2.0. Did you know that in Steve Young's final game in the USFL, he was playing running back because they got so decimated in the backfield?
I did not know that.
See?
People add that back into the Montana.
People scoffed at Steve Young 2.0, and yet here's Sean Payton strutting around saying, told you so.
I'm just saying, in the unquantifiables, it seems like he's at the top end of all those of that range. Here's the bottom line with all this stuff. The other same argument I make about Kyler Murray. When Kyler Murray has a bad passing game, but he can still rush for 80 yards.
Yeah.
There's a baseline, there's a floor to that offense. So Taysom still ran 10 times for 51. 4 of those were scrambles and all that. I mean, there's a couple touchdowns in there, right? So I'm just saying there is a floor
Right.
with him as a runner that elevates the rest of the run game so he doesn't have to be as pristine as a passer.
I mean, I would give you the real bottom line from that game is he had essentially 2 turnover-worthy plays, right? There was a fumble where he actually ironically lost the ball running, like the stuff that he's supposed to be reliable at, takes the ball, gets into open field, makes a good play, and then the ball gets pulled out from behind. And he also had a pretty ugly pass on a slant that could have been picked off. I think it was a slant. So 2 turnover-worthy plays, effectively, and his grade was still good. There was a lot of pretty good Taysom Hill. Now, I think...
We mentioned the Falcons' defense at least once before we get off the
it's
rails
garbage.
Here. Okay, thanks.
I think that, look, Taysom Hill can be a viable starting quarterback in the NFL. Certainly, if Drew Brees is missing for 4 games... he can do what Teddy Bridgewater did last year in terms of be good enough for them to win 4 games, right? I will say that if he's to be a long-term starting option, as long-term as a 30-year-old can be, they need to figure out why he can't throw the ball deep, because that's weird. A guy with his arm strength should be able to throw the ball further than that without it being 15 yards underthrown.
The Flacco, it's a timing. But
it's not just that, because it's also dying at 50.
Yeah, I mean... How much
Chad
evidence?
Pennington could throw the ball further than that.
How much evidence? He hit was it Deontay Harris last year in the Vikings game for 50 yards? That was that well underthrown too?
Yeah.
Looking back, actually.
Yes.
I just remember he had one really long 50-yarder. So my memory's not perfect, guys.
No, I don't. He's always had. They've uncorked him for the sort of designated deep ball when Drew Brees has been there and hasn't really had that.
Sure.
And I can't think of a single one that hasn't been pretty significantly underthrown, but they're usually such massive play action trick plays that it doesn't matter. But if he's going to start, everything outside of that I think can work as a viable starter, but that is a problem unless he fixes that.
All right, well, Taysom Hill's Saints are the number 1 seed.
And I would just like to make it clear that I am here for it. I am all aboard the Taysom Hill fun train.
So really quickly here, they're the number 1 seed right now. I mentioned to you off air yesterday, is this Colin Kaepernick replacing Alex Smith? You're like, everybody's making that comparison. Is it actually, the way the Saints defense is playing, is it actually closer to 2015 Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler? Where let's not forget, Brock played well. This is the only time of his career where he played well. Brock played well. Still feels like we're
okay.
Listen, the sample size on Taysom Hill's not great.
Yes.
Brock played well.
Okay.
The only time in his career for a stretch of games. And then the wheels fell off. They put Peyton back in, and it was like, okay, all things are back to normal now. Are we going to see a similar situation where Taysom's going to play well, but at some point, he's still not as good as Drew Brees. Drew Brees is healthy, and sometime in December comes back, and they drag his poo arm to the Super Bowl with on the back of this defense.
The Peyton Brock thing was interesting because, in theory, Brock Osweiler was the future there, right? He was potentially a replacement for Peyton Manning once Peyton Manning hung him up, which was evidently going to be at the end of this season. I mean, Taysom is still auditioning for that, right? And for some reason, it just feels less plausible because he's 30.
What does 30 matter right now? What's the future? What's the future?
You matters, right?
Is 5 years a lot of starting time for him?
It feels wrong.
You don't need 10 years out of him.
It just feels wrong to be talking about a long-term successor when the guy's 30 years old.
They've been hiding him at H-back. Of course it makes sense. This all makes sense. The punt protector / H-back /
there are
gimmick
parallels,
player.
But the difference is I don't think there's any scenario whereby Taysom Hill can take Drew Brees' job.
History doesn't have to repeat itself.
There was kind of a way that Brock Osweiler, it was a decision to go back to Peyton, given what Peyton had already shown that year.
To be fair, too, I mean, Brees has played okay this year. He's been fine. Peyton was a disaster.
Bad. That's what I'm saying.
And Osweiler played better than Peyton Manning.
Yeah, so
he didn't going forward, but during that season he did play better.
That made it a real decision. Peyton Manning might not play better than the guy we just took off the field, whereas I don't think that's going to be a question for Drew Brees and the Saints.
All right, well, again, Taysom Hill Saints are the number 1 seed currently in the NFC. Let's go to the AFC.
Okay.
Tennessee Titans, Baltimore Ravens. I might be ready to concede to body blows.
To body blows.
That tackling Derrick Henry in the fourth quarter and overtime is a thing. That people don't want to do it.
Okay.
But just as important as not trying to tackle Derrick Henry, people didn't want to tackle A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
And he forced 7 missed tackles in this game. Most
on,
we've seen in a game.
Plays.
Yes. Most we've seen in a game since 2016 for a receiver. Don't cut off my stat, please. I was in the middle of a great stat. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, I'm done.
All right.
But that was the name of the game, right? I think I've talked a lot on here about, like, this is a Tannehill team, and it goes as far as Tannehill's played. Now, this was the opposite, where I think Tannehill was just being dragged by people that couldn't get tackled. A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry, who just put the Titans on their back in the fourth quarter and overtime, made this thing happen.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
There's a certain...
I'm sorry I yelled at you, by the way.
That was me. It's Monday. It's early for us all.
I'm having a rough morning.
There is a certain degree to which just having those imposing, physical, freakish athletes is a problem for defenses. It isn't always, but eventually you fall off a tackle on one of those guys because they're huge, right? And I think that's basically what you see. Now, Tennessee, because they keep feeding them, or it's certainly Derrick Henry, because they keep feeding him, and then A.J. Brown was getting the late targets in that game, like, so it looks clutch. You know what I mean? Whereas really it's just a product of you've given that by the guy the ball a ton, and you're still giving it to him late, and that's when the missed tackles came. But I think with all those guys, there is a value to just being that athlete, whether it's DK Metcalf, whether it's A.J. Brown, whether it's Derrick Henry. Like, when you have those freakish measurables that are clearly functional in the NFL in a way that, Leonard Fournette's are not, there's a value to that, because sooner or later you're going to give that guy the ball in the fourth quarter, and a 200-pound running back, or a 200-pound defensive back rather, is going to try and make a tackle and just fall off. And
get the freaky trait running backs.
Yeah, but I have a hard time embracing the concept that you do, that it's a product of the body blows that you've given them already.
Yeah, I mean, look, it still comes down to, if you're going to when you evaluate running backs, I think it's how well do you create on your own, whether that is through Dalvin Cook-ish acceleration and speed, or through Derrick Henry's inability to be tackled. I just think this was just, I don't know, big boy football, not just from a running game standpoint, but from an A.J. Brown standpoint. It was just freak athletes willing the Titans to victory. It was a fascinating game because the Ravens were in control most of the time. Yes. And I thought the Titans, it's another game I reviewed and went through play by play, and I thought the Titans have some interesting personnel on the defensive side of the ball, including Desmond King, who they can deploy all over the place now, and Amani Hooker, who is kind of like a hybrid player coming out of college. They have some interesting personnel, and they were playing such a vanilla basic cover 3, worried about the run game early on, and the Ravens did a good job of scheming it up. They schemed open the old scissors concept. That's what got Mark Andrews wide open for a touchdown. But once the Titans went to a little bit more man, a little bit more forward cross quarters, the Ravens did nothing in the second half. And I thought from a game plan standpoint, the Titans did a nice job of adjusting, and it still comes back down to the Ravens in comeback situations, and when they need to pass the ball, do they have it? And I don't know.
But they did.
I know
That's the weird thing about this game.
But they had a chance for a game-winning touchdown. Lamar left a 3rd and 6 on the table. Yeah. 2 guys wide open. He ends up scrambling, throwing it away.
They at least executed a drive to score points at the end of the game in a hurry-up situation in a way that we didn't think, the way that there was no evidence previously that Lamar could do. They act like they did that, right? They rolled up there with a pass-first game plan that's been their Achilles heel. But we need to talk about how the Baltimore Ravens are effectively like bouncing their way out of the playoffs right now by throwing away these games. They did it in New England. They're doing it now in Tennessee. And as I say, it was weird. They were in control of this game for most of it. Decided late on the tackling was just not worthwhile. Lamar actually executes one of these drives. Now, you can fairly point out that he could have had a touchdown instead of the 3, could have won the game instead of tying it and sending it to overtime. But the point is, he did execute that drive, get them back, put up points in a way that we haven't seen before, and they still lost. And now, for the first time, they're on the outside of the playoff picture looking in. They are not in the postseason as things stand.
It is crazy. The Ravens are...
The Browns, by the way, are ahead of them.
It is crazy. I mean, I thought of all the divisions that we talked about the NFC West being one of the most competitive, and I thought that the AFC North would be pretty competitive as well. And I remember early in the season we went through the schedules and said, man, the AFC North we were mostly doing it through like the Browns lens, where it was like, this feels like another one of the years where they're better, but it's not going to show up in record. But so far it has. They're 7-3. It's the Ravens, because they've lost now to the Titans yesterday, the Patriots, the Chiefs, and the Steelers. They've lost to all good teams plus the Patriots, who in any given week could just, play pretty well, and it was a rainstorm.
Right.
So the schedule's caught up a little bit now, not to the Steelers, who are undefeated, and not to the Browns, who are 7-3, but the Ravens have played that first place schedule, and that's come back to bite a little bit.
Yeah, and it's more one of those, it's like when you're grading these teams on the curve that we keep talking about of, this is a team that wants to win in the postseason, right? You can look at it and say, all right, their defeats have basically been to 3 good teams and a freaky weather game, right? A freaky weather game plus Bill Belichick. And you can kind of dismiss that, right, as, well, that's a pretty tough run of games, and it's excusable to lose those, I guess. But, one, those are the teams you're going to have to face in the postseason, so not being able to beat them is a problem. And 2, the cumulative weight of losing those games at the moment is keeping you away from the postseason to have a shot at beating them again. Like, it's becoming enough of a problem that you've got a pretty fine margin for error now for down the stretch to lose too many more.
Yeah, they are.
Are they fixable this year? Again, on the curve of this team wants to win in the postseason, not just make it there.
Honestly, not to oversimplify it, I really think it comes down to Lamar as a passer. Yeah. And, him having... There were so many games last year, just in PFF terms, or just simple stat. How many games last year did he have like 5 touchdowns on 22 attempts? Like multiple times where he would throw 4 and 5 touchdowns on 25 or fewer attempts. And that's efficiency, right? It's like you only have to throw the ball 25 times. It's going to be in optimum situations. And when you hit 17 of them or 18 of them, as he did so many times, there were many games like that, you put up those crazy MVP numbers. And because last year they went for 1 million 4th downs and they hit almost all of them, right? And you were playing with 4 downs instead of 3. Like all of the winning on the margins were there last year, and they're not this year. I don't think they can get back there. I don't think they can unless Lamar off script in games where he has to drop back 35 and 40 times and the ball is in his hands. He's got to make decision after decision after decision. That's what I always talk about with the great ones, like the Bradys and Breezes and Rodgers and all the guys that have done it for 15, 20 years, right? Lamar has 3rd and 6 with the game on the line. 2 guys are open, short of the sticks, but with catch and run opportunities. And he steps up like he's going to scramble. This is what's different with him this year. All the defending that we did of him last year, that he doesn't look to scramble. He wants to sit in the pocket. He wants to go through 17 progressions before he even runs. That's different this year. This was first read, and he steps up to scramble. And on this particular play, Jeffrey Simmons was kind of mush rush spying, right? And he gets scared by Jeffrey Simmons. This is a long-winded answer to say they're not going to do it.
Okay.
But Jeffrey Simmons just scares him from scrambling. He loses himself in the pocket, has 2 open receivers that he can't throw to anymore, scrambles out, tries to buy time, throws it away. And that led to the game-tying field goal, and they go to overtime. To me, it's those types of plays where you're not trusting putting the ball into his hands 35 or 40 times, and because there's those plays that he's leaving on the table right now. That's my issue with the Ravens, because it was already going to be impossible for them to dominate at the same level as they did last year from a run game and play action perspective. So yeah, I think that's the missing piece.
We talk all the time about how sometimes the box score doesn't mesh up with the PFF grading because, of all the plays we all know about, they can lie. Sometimes, though, it matches perfectly, and the story that a box score paints in your head is actually the right one in terms of how a guy played. Just looking at Lamar's stat line, 29 attempts, 17 completions, 186 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. That's broadly how he played yesterday, particularly when a lot of those yards came from like one freaking dime to Mark Andrews down the middle of the field, like down the seam into a tight closing window.
That was beautiful.
Amazing throw.
The second one was, the scissors concept.
Right.
I said he did a nice job leading into space, but it was wide.
But like that was an amazing pass.
Yep.
But that was basically most of his passing output in that game. And you're right. I think like the start of their season and after that Chiefs game, the Ravens season was all about, can they beat Kansas City, right? We figured that they would make the postseason, probably be good enough to beat more or less anybody else. And then inevitably they're going to come up against Kansas City again and be in that weird situation where you're going to need to pass and be that team, and you can't beat Kansas City by current evidence. Now, that's not even the question anymore. Like, you're not getting a shot at Kansas City the way you're playing. You need Lamar Jackson to take a step to even be the match of the other teams in the AFC to even get there. Like, that, you need to, I mean, Cleveland, they've already beaten, but you need to show you can beat Pittsburgh. You need to show you can beat Tennessee again. Like, there are teams out there below Kansas City that you need to improve to even beat.
Look, I think the Ravens are still good, and they defensively they put a ton of pressure on Ryan Tannehill. Give him credit, man. He was getting popped a few times. Baltimore still has the ability to put pressure on the quarterback, to confuse quarterbacks. They have the coverage ability on the back end to make life difficult. But even in week 1, I said this just doesn't feel right. It feels like there's a lot of dependence on Lamar being special 4, 5, 6 times a game, and that's a tightrope act that they're playing. I like that you just talked about his stat line, because I do think you roll it all together, those are the stat lines that just feel like Lamar this year versus last year. Again, 25 attempt outings where he was just like, oh, you missed one throw the entire game. That's impressive. Yeah. It's just not the same right now.
Derrick Henry, the first running back in the NFL this year, over 1,000 yards. Derrick Henry's yards after contact this season would rank 3rd in the NFL, behind only Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook.
That's impressive.
In total rushing yards.
That's impressive. And that's why I said I didn't care. I didn't care if they franchised him.
Same thing, by the way.
The long-term aspect of it, I don't know. But it was like, you kind of want to run this offense and still have him there.
Oh, it's not quite the same. I was going to say the same thing is true for Dalvin Cook, but it isn't quite. Dalvin Cook's yards after contact would rank him 4th in the NFL.
Dalvin's the best anyway. He's the best. All right, let's go on to New England and Houston. This turned out to be a really good game, and the Texans held on. This was, man, we keep waiting for Deshaun Watson to have the bad game. He went the other way. This was just unbelievable. I don't know. He was making throw after throw in this game. I still think an underrated part of what's happened in New England, though, the offense has become quite efficient over the last few weeks. Like, Cam's playing some pretty clean ball, and they're, yesterday used Damiere Byrd as their deep threat and Jacoby Myers. Like, they're starting to come together offensively, but this is New England's defense just not being able to stop Deshaun Watson. We did mention it on the podcast. It's either Deshaun has a bad game or a Superman game. This was Superman game for Deshaun. I got one right by saying either or.
Nice. And this needs the same caveat as the Atlanta defense game, the Patriots offense was pretty efficient. On the other hand, they were facing the Texans.
No, they did it against the Ravens.
I know,
the week before in a rainstorm.
Yes.
Let's use the rainstorm the other way.
I'm just saying that if we're going to give them credit in this game, you kind of have to be aware they were facing the Texans defense, which is terrible.
I'm aware. The AFC South, it's difficult now. Hashtag, it's difficult now.
Deshaun Watson is honestly playing as well as any quarterback in the NFL. Kind of through this part of the season.
Yeah.
It was a rocky, remember how brutal their schedule was to begin the season, right? It was 3-4 straight games of absolute nightmare opponents. And you're like, the season is already gone, which it was, because the Texans overall are bad. But also, Watson had played well, not great. And it was he's not quite right without Nuke Hopkins yet. Hasn't really meshed with everybody else. It's also he's just been facing some brutal defenses. Now, neither of those things is true. He is more comfortable within this offense. It doesn't feature Nuke Hopkins, and he isn't facing this nightmare schedule of defenses. So, Watson is cooking as much as any quarterback in football.
Yeah, he's been awesome. and taking care of the ball. As we said, that was what I was most impressed about, mentioned on the preview podcast. When you're down as often as you are, you're going to chuck some into coverage. He's not doing that. That was one of the things that held Watson back. And I think in the history of PFF, when we've had our quarterback arguments, a lot of them have been centered around turnover-worthy plays. This was like Andrew Luck coming up, and like so many quarterbacks who are a little bit more volatile and they add a ton of value, and you remember all the good stuff and you forget a lot of the bad stuff. And people are like, oh, PFF, you hate this guy or you hate that guy. Andrew Luck was one of those guys who just didn't really take good care of the ball until about year 6. Watson hasn't really taken great care of the ball over the last few years, so that was always what was kind of holding him back from our perspective. Now he's making Superman plays plus taking care of the ball. Like that's an amazing next step that if they had any kind of defense you'd be like, okay, Watson's an MVP candidate.
Yeah.
And he legitimately is. He should be, even though the Texans have 3 wins.
Yeah, it's sad. I was thinking that yesterday, that he's got as strong a candidacy for MVP in terms of what it's supposed to represent, like the best player in the NFL, essentially, and yet has no shot of winning it because, like, even if he is the most valuable player to his team, what does it matter? They're losing games. Like, they're not good enough for him to be in MVP conversation. He should be right now arguably the front runner for Offensive Player of the Year, essentially.
Oh, that's a good consolation prize.
Since week 3, you eliminate those first 3 games of nightmare opponents, he's the number 1 graded quarterback in the NFL, and it's actually by a reasonable distance.
And look, we've mentioned before, we could play this game every single year. If you take out 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks of Watson, he's top 3 or whatever. This was literally the Russell Wilson argument for years here. But this year, Watson, you took out those first 3 games. There's not a disaster in there. It's more to just say since week 3 he's been the best.
It's just say eliminate the nightmare schedule of opponents from, like, not even like before you had to do it where you're like, okay, if you just take out his bad game, right? Yeah. His baseline is higher than that. Now my point is simply, if you just remove the nightmare stretch of opponents he faced to begin the season, that kind of changed everybody's perception of Deshaun Watson right from the get-go, right? This idea of Russell Wilson needed to start on fire to start the ball rolling. This started the ball rolling for Watson in the other direction.
Wrong way.
Right? It was like, no Nuke Hopkins, Bill O'Brien's now going to get fired, everything's falling apart in Houston, Deshaun Watson isn't playing as well. Like that started the ball rolling in that direction, and nobody, I think, has kind of quite mentally squared the idea that was just a bad run of opponents. And Watson actually has gone back, right? Everything else still sucks. Texans are bad. Bill O'Brien got fired. The organization is being rebuilt. But Watson actually reversed course and improved, got better.
And it comes back to, I think they've got a decent receiving core. Even without DeAndre Hopkins, the ability to spread the ball around to Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller, Kiki Cutie, who we love. Jordan Akins had a huge game yesterday at tight end, who is a better athlete than Darren Fells, and he started to use him a little bit. Here's the other thing, just for perspective. On the other side of the ball, Vernon Hargreaves. I was sending some stats your way. Vernon has spent 2 full seasons now with the Texans. He has 2 PFF grades above 70 and 6 above 60. 21 games below 60. That is really tough to do. And I think it just shows so 21 games below 60 at corner, I think it just shows the lack of depth that the Texans have, that they have to keep trotting him out there, and other guys too. And at the most important part of the defense, Houston is an absolute train wreck. And they have been for 2 years. The fact that they even made it to the playoffs last year with this secondary was a minor miracle. The offense is coming along now. The pass protection's been so much better the last couple of years. I mean, Watson was really not under a ton of quick pressure or early pressure. A lot of the pressure is still invited by him. The offensive line's so much better. They've got playmakers. The offense is playoff caliber, and the defense is just a mess.
It also shows how hard it is to get run out of the league if you're a first-round pick. Like, that guy, for his career, has given up a passer rating of 107 and a completion rate of 69%.
It's easier, though. That usually happens with, like, offensive linemen, right? because if you get whooped like 7 times a game, 4 of them the quarterback gets the ball off, a couple of them he gets hit, and it's like, oh, you were as a lineman, oh, you were good for 54 out of 61 plays. That's not too bad, right? As a corner, when you lose, it's like first down and first. It just feels so much worse. How do you stay out there?
Because corners are great at getting reclamation project gigs, right? You can crap out of your first job pretty easily because, again, you get eviscerated. But teams keep giving you another chance. Like, look, DJ Hayden is still getting jobs. Like, that guy's always been bad.
Yeah, but he hasn't.
One season he was good.
He's had at least.
The point is,
had like one good game in 2 years.
If you're a former first-round pick, you will get a series of next jobs based off the fact that you were a former first-round pick at cornerback.
I fully admit I would have given Vernon more opportunities, only because I think his decline just doesn't make sense.
You're chasing what you saw in college as a prospect. I'm just saying it's really hard to get, like, you were bad. What we saw on tape coming into the league clearly doesn't exist at this level. Bye-bye. You will get second chance, you will get third chance, you will get fourth chance if you are a former high draft pick at cornerback.
I'm out on Vernon.
Now, officially?
I'm out on him.
After only 5 short seasons of train wreck.
I thought he could have done it all, man. I should have known when he showed up at the combine, though, at like 205 with the weirdest looking body type that looked nothing like what he was in college, that something was off. But he did it all in college. He was a true freshman, just understood the game, and he played every type of coverage, and he had ball skills and movement skills.
It's one of the more unusual, like, why does this not look the same things?
Yeah, there are other guys where they miss, and you go back, and it's like, okay, maybe we missed this. We missed that, right? There's nothing to go back and say.
Right.
I guess there's a couple plays here and there, but
they were all like, even his bad plays were like double moves, where everybody in college loses to the double move because you just don't run them.
Or he had a battle with Amari Cooper where Cooper just got the better of him a few times, but he got the better of Cooper other times. It's like, all right, that stuff happens.
Right.
Anyway, people pay attention to Deshaun Watson. He's playing really well. Let's go Green Bay and Indianapolis. This game was nuts, really. It had the feel.
This week had weird games.
It did. It had the feel like Green Bay was in control, that they might pull away. Indianapolis just kept hanging in there. Rodgers made some really nice throws. Rivers made some really nice throws. It was supposed to be Green Bay's offense against this really good Colts zone-heavy defense that just doesn't allow big plays, but they ended up giving up some big plays to Green Bay. The end of game sequencing was incredible as well. The Colts had a chance to almost finish it with a 4th down. They get it. They convert. And then on 5 running plays to run out the clock, they had 5 holding calls and an illegal motion. That is really difficult to do. So they were unable to run the clock out.
Particularly in this year of we're not calling holding.
5. They had 2-on-1 play. At one point, it was like, hey, we finally got away with no holding on this play. It was only an illegal motion. And then they decided to match it with 2 holding on 1 play. And Green Bay has a chance for the game-winning touchdown. They spike it a couple times. I feel like they left some opportunities on the table. Rodgers, the same way Lamar. So Lamar had a game-tying drive at the end of the 4th quarter. Rodgers had the same exact thing. But I feel like they left touchdown opportunities on the table. Not specific plays necessarily with Green Bay. It's just like the time management. They ended up with like 1 shot at the end zone. They missed it, and it's like, all right, let's kick a field goal because they spiked it, and I think they left opportunities.
Well, and also then in overtime, they fumbled the ball away.
Well, that was huge. The 2 overtime losses, by the way.
This was another game
where both
where
teams won the coin toss and then lost.
Yeah, this was another game like Baltimore where it's like Green Bay had this game wrapped up. Like they were 28-14 up, I think, going to the half.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're going to walk away with this. This is well in control. And then up until that field goal at the end, their offense didn't score in the second half. They just stopped scoring. And it's like, well, Green Bay's defense isn't good enough to maintain the lead that they had for like an entire half, right? Like they're going to just chip away. And going into the game, like my big point going into this was, look, I think people are overreacting a little bit to the nightmare game that Aaron Rodgers had against Tampa Bay, right? Where everything went wrong.
Right.
And he was terrible, and the entire situation was just a mess. But even since that game, he was, I think, the number 2 graded quarterback in the NFL, just behind Patrick Mahomes, right? And there was like 0.3 of a grading point between the two of them. I think people were like overreacting that like, oh, okay, he was terrible in that game. So the kind of the luster has come off Rodgers' incredible start. It hadn't really. I mean, he wasn't playing as well as he did before that, but he was still playing as well as any quarterback in the league. And the point is, Rodgers going into this game against Phillip Rivers, I mean, that's kind of all you need to know, isn't it? Right? Better quarterback. And a hell of a disparity. But Rivers out-dueled Aaron Rodgers in this game. Rivers actually looked fantastic in this game.
I told you, it wasn't in Green Bay. It was in the Dome.
Despite like injuring himself trying to throw a block and then missing a few plays. Jacoby Brissett has to come in and Phillip Rivers has to get himself patched up and throw him back out there. But like, this was really impressive from Phillip Rivers.
Imagine the most immobile quarterback in the NFL then getting like an ankle injury and becoming even less mobile.
Yes.
That was
and then juking
awesome.
Rashawn Gary out of a sack.
No, Rivers, like, this has been Rivers' season, man. You know, using the game grade proxy, he's got a whole bunch of games above 75, a couple in the 70s, and a couple disasters 55 and below. 3 of them. 3 disasters and a whole bunch of solid. That has been Rivers this season. And this was one of his better games throwing the ball.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Packers defense isn't great, but Rivers hanging in there, making tight red zone throws. Michael Pittman takes a drag route to the house, right? Rivers he's got to be the all-time leader in this. Little shallow cross. Nobody loves a shallow cross more than Phillip Rivers. And every now and again, the defense busts, and Michael Pittman gets to take it 40 yards. He did it with the Chargers all the time. Rivers, just the little shallow cross for the touchdown. But it was good, man. It was the Colts I think are starting to show some weapons on offense too, which includes Pittman, the rookie, and includes Naheem Hines. I mean, every single week it's like, all right, who's going to step up? Who's going to be the guy? It was Hines a couple weeks ago. Pittman's been having some good games. T.Y. Hilton is still there, even though he's not in the mix all the time. They're doing a good job of spreading the ball around in Indy.
Phillip Rivers has 61,954 passing yards for his NFL career. How many of those do you think were shallow crossing routes? It's just what number?
At least a third.
Third? 33, 30,
shallows.
30,000, or sorry, 20,000-ish. I could buy that. I think it's definitely 4 figures. It might be 5 figures.
But this was my point. I think Robert Mays had a tweet yesterday. He took one of Phillip Rivers' best throws, and he's like, this looks like an old man throw, but Rivers been doing this for 10 years. Like, this was my point coming into the season, was the aesthetics of Phillip Rivers making throws has never been good. It's like slightly worse now over the last couple of years. Plus, all of his bad throws came on primetime last year, so people thought that he lost it. But throw for throw, he hadn't lost it. He just, he was the same Phillip Rivers.
This was inevitable. Like, for a guy with that shot put throwing motion, the ass end of his career was going to look bad, right? It was never an aesthetically pleasing throwing motion. So when you do start to physically decline, it's going to look ridiculous, which is what you see sometimes. And that's just inevitable.
So so many things to unpack here too. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the hottest topic in all of the NFL.
That dude was getting death threats last night on Twitter. Like,
was he?
People suck.
He was part of the reason why they were in this game.
Yes.
They on the comeback. Look, Rodgers doesn't always look great in comeback opportunities. We've talked about that before as well. I think there's times when he looks great as a front runner when things are going great and the offense is clicking. But when he has to, force some uncomfortable throws, he's not always doing it, right? But it's 3rd and 10. They're backed up at their own goal line, and Rodgers heaves one 51 yards from the line of scrimmage and puts it right on Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who, by the way, just runs by the cover 2 linebacker. I mean, that was just pure speed. And that's where I think the Packers offense, when you have a Devontae who's special, MVS is the deep threat, the guy that's going to create those big plays, and Allen Lazard's your complementary, more of a possession receiver. But that play there, and then there was the one, another 50-yarder before the half that became pass interference. I mean, that is the value of having him out there. Then he takes, of course, the bubble screen and fumbles in overtime and loses the game. But that's kind of the highs and lows of having number 83 out there for the Packers. I still think as a number 3 that instills fear in the defense, he brings a ton of value there. And he did yesterday until the fumble.
Right. And I'm trying to I can't find the quote right now, but in addition to the random assholes on Twitter sending him death threats, some Packers reporter asked, basically, I hate to be blunt, but how can you live with MVS right now, the way he's playing, like because of the mistakes, to LaFleur. You're like, well, that's why, right? It's not like it's just mistakes. There's a lot of good that's coming along with it as well. He is he's an extremes player, right? You're going to get a lot of good, you're going to get a lot of bad, and we're going to hope that the good outweighs the bad.
He is a 6'5" John Ross. How's that?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, okay, sure.
So, I mean, John Ross, it's like for every spectacular play that he put on film, he would put a bad one on there. So it's weighing the balance of those two and knowing that there's some big plays in there.
Right. I mean, but that's the point, is that it's not like he's just bad, right? Like the mistakes came last night in critical situations, and that's a real problem. And when that happens, like sometimes this is a game of inches, as the old cliche goes, and sometimes it does come down to the bounce of a ball. And if you time your shitty play for that point, you're basically the reason they lost the game. But it's not like you didn't do good outside of that. I mean, Justin Jefferson is another example, right? The guy hasn't dropped the ball much this year. He's been almost the best receiver in the NFL for most of his rookie season, dialed up his shitty play, the drop, right on whatever it was, 3rd and 6 on the drive they needed to win the game. Like, absolute worst possible time to dial it up. It doesn't make you a bad player, but like that's the reality. And Valdez-Scantling, because he makes more mistakes generally than a Justin Jefferson, has dialed up a few of those now in pretty key situations. That's
why I don't mind him. If he's your number 3 or 4 option, and then I think you're okay. It's unfortunate that that's how it happened. But credit the Colts. They did crack down a little bit more in the second half. Just a quick shout out to our guy Darius Leonard, who, again, friend of the show-ish, very upset with us for not making the top 101 last year at the end of the season.
Now he's pissed off with Aaron Rodgers.
He was mad that Aaron Rodgers slighted him and said that Fred Warner's the best linebacker in the NFL. I think it's just Darius wants to be recognized. They were talking about it on the field, which was funny, and we think.
Well, Rodgers seemed to find it funny. I mean, he was giggling away at it. I don't know if Darius was too tickled.
And Darius is not going to come out of this game with the greatest grade. It did feel like they did some stuff to attack him a little bit. And I have to say, just shout out to linebackers, man. This year, I just want to give a shout out to linebackers.
All right,
because you look across the linebacker grades in the league, they're not great. And I really think of all the years in the NFL, the poor linebackers are just everything that the NFL is doing offensively to put defenses in a bind is essentially making life difficult for linebackers. Yeah. So there's more boot action than ever, right? You got to play the backside run, you got to play the boot action, the route concepts against zone, because everybody's playing a ton of zone. You got to work deep to short, and they're high-lowing you guys like crazy. And then all of a sudden, Valdez-Scantling, they're putting speed receivers in the slot, and you're supposed to turn and run with them. Whether you're playing cover 3 or cover 2, you got to run with Tyreek Hill down the field and with Valdez-Scantling down the field. All the things that poor linebackers have to do in today's NFL. So I just want to give them a shout out. It's not easy, man.
I think I feel for you guys. Yeah, they're the biggest victims of this explosion of offense in 2020. Like, linebackers are suffering it the most.
There you go. So here's what happened here. The Colts still in control of the AFC South because they have the tiebreaker over the Titans. They'll play again soon, right? It's not this week, right?
Yeah, through 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
So they'll play again. The Colts coming off of back-to-back huge wins, Titans and the Packers. The Packers lose control of the number 1 seed, conceding that to the Saints, who are currently in number 1. Seahawks are still in the mix. The Bucs are still in the mix. And the Packers, of course, still in the mix. But that all-important number 1 seed in the NFC is currently in the hands of Taysom Hill and the Saints.
The way God intended it to be.
Yes, as expected. All this great quarterback play around the NFL, and Taysom Hill's the number 1 seeded quarterback in the NFC at the moment. All right, let's go to Sunday Night Football. Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders. This was a pristine quarterbacking effort on both sides of the ball. Just Derek Carr didn't miss a throw until maybe the interception at the end of the game.
Which he definitely missed.
I know he missed that.
Yeah.
But Derek Carr was awesome.
This was...
And wait, I didn't think there was a chance that the Raiders would even keep it close and have a shot here again. But Carr played out of his mind.
That's the funny thing, right? Is in the analysis of this game leading into it, it never even occurred to us, or to certainly me. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm pretty sure you thought this as well. Never even occurred to us that there was the possibility that Derek Carr could have basically a perfect game and actually hang toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes and out-duel him for the majority of a game and win because of that, right? Wasn't even like in the realms of possibility that if the Raiders were going to win this game, it was going to be because the defense could cause Mahomes the similar kinds of problems that they caused him the first time around, right? And in that game, remember, like Mahomes didn't grade that badly, but he had 4 turnover-worthy plays. The rest of the season combined, he had 6, right, heading into last night. So the Raiders basically achieved the sum totality of the problems everybody else had caused him for the entire season in one game. And the idea was that's probably not happening twice, and it didn't, right? Mahomes was way more comfortable yesterday than he was the first time. Therefore, the Raiders were fairly well unable to stop him for most of that game, and yet they were still winning for most of it because Derek Carr was playing out of his freaking mind. That is the best game I've ever seen from Derek Carr. It's one of the best games I've seen from a quarterback, period, in a long time. He was pretty much perfect, and for a decent chunk of that game was being let down by his receivers, right? Fullback, and now it's a fullback, right? So where are your expectations on what a fullback should be able to achieve in 2020?
Well, listen, mine are high. There's 4 fullbacks in the world.
Yeah,
that's it.
Right.
If you're one of the 4 fullbacks in the world, you better be able to catch because we'll get number 5 out there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just saying, you should have certain levels of expectations for a fullback, and they probably shouldn't be that high in the passing game. That being said, Derek Carr gave his a chance to make a couple of catches, and he didn't bring them in. He also made a pretty impressive throw to Nelson Aguilar with some problems, or moving to his right. Aguilar, it would have been a tough catch, but it's the kind of thing that separates Aguilar, who's having a really good season, from actually being a really good receiver. It's like, for all the good plays you're making, you kind of need to come up with that one. Like, it's not that hard. You got yourself in a position to make it and then just didn't. So he was being let down by his receivers and then got himself all the way to the death. It's like, but you scored too early. That's too much time for Mahomes. And then the inevitable happened. Mahomes marched down, put up a touchdown. I mean, I was texting you, right? I was like, this is like a genuinely near flawless performance from Carr. I was like, but he's going to lose, isn't he?
So I was half joking but serious. I was like, the Raiders need to somehow, from the 1-yard line, use all of the 2 minutes, even though the Chiefs have 2 timeouts. Use all of the 2 minutes to score. And then you see Jason Witten with the false start that he fakes like he's going into motion.
Genius.
I think they were listen, they were setting it up pretty well. So we're going to do the Jason Witten false start.
Yeah.
And then they ran it to the 1 on the next play. It's like, all right, this is setting up. It's that balance between we have to score a touchdown, but we also need to use a lot of time here. By the way, it was who else jumped off sides? Who did 12 men on the field yesterday?
Green Bay?
Green Bay did it. This is just taking over the league here. Since the Titans took the 12 men on the field penalty on purpose on like second and short to say that we want to give you the first down so that we could just make this stop the next series. I'm seeing a lot of that stuff. I mean,
it's a pretty obvious breakdown in the system in terms of it's exploitable.
Yeah.
Until you close that loophole, teams are going to be exploiting it.
And it's not about starting and stopping the clock. It's about if it's second and short, chances are that you're not going to stop the team in that just losing 1 down, giving them the first down, and then saying, okay, now let's make the stop in the next 3 to save some time. I mean, it's a thing, and a lot of teams are doing that type of thing more. Also thought that the Raiders was at the end of the first half. They just kept trying to hold left and right, too. It was too much time left. There was like 40-something seconds. You can't hold on every single play, but they were just grabbing like crazy, and there was penalty after penalty against the Chiefs trying to stop them at the end of the half.
2 things I want to talk about in this game. 1, given that it's Mahomes and the Chiefs, and you're not stopping them in this game, whatever was happening the first time around, it's how much do they have time? 90 seconds left? Something like
75
that?
seconds.
75 seconds.
Minute 30-something.
So a minute 30-something.
No,
isn't that 90-something seconds?
It was less than that. 150.
Whatever. Let's say enough time, right?
I don't remember.
Comfortably.
Might have been 90. Might have been right.
Is Mahomes and the Chiefs the only team in the NFL that you would just let score? You score, everybody knows it's too much time, right? Everybody. Inevitable. Like the entire world is going, oh, you've left Mahomes too much time, and that's going to be a problem. Chiefs drive down, score the touchdown that everybody knew they were going to score, and now you've got 28 seconds to try and answer. You're screwed. Should you just let the Chiefs score because you've left too much time on the clock and then given yourself 90 seconds to try and answer?
I would argue, did the Raiders actually employ that strategy? Did you see their coverage on Kelsey?
Right, but you chewed up too much time doing it.
No, I know. They didn't do a good job time-wise.
Somehow bust the coverage on Tyreek Hill in the first play of the Chiefs' scoring drive. Oh, whoops.
Yeah, I mean, it was really easy. It looked really easy.
I mean, it was.
Chiefs.
But they're unique in terms of that is the situation that offense loves to play in the most. Like if every situation was that, the Chiefs would score like 100 points a game and nobody else would be even in the same stratosphere. Like they're going to score in a way that most teams you can't make the same case for. Particularly when you're going to like soften up anyway to try and prevent what happening. Like it's a recipe for an immediate answer or touchdown, and now you're in a hole with no time left to work with.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if there's still, as good as the Chiefs are, there's still like a possibility that you'd keep them to a field goal.
Of course, but how big is that possibility versus your ability to answer in 28 seconds?
Yeah, I don't know. In that situation, though, too, I don't know if I'm ready. I'm not ready to just let the Chiefs score. I'm not ready to do it.
The question is, right, would you rather, with 90 seconds or whatever it was, with 90 seconds left on the clock, would you rather Kansas City have the ball down or you have the ball down?
At some point, the offense, I mean, if you just literally just like let Tyreek run behind the defense, is that how you would do it? You just bust the coverage, hope that they find him, and he goes for 75 yards. And then hope that he doesn't
realize that that's what you're trying to do and stop?
Yeah, the problem in that situation, too, is then you're down 3, and then you're driving back.
Yes.
Touchdown wins it. Field goal ties it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
you have the shot versus the problem with you have the shot with the ability to control the clock versus they have the shot with the ability to prevent you from answering, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, look, if there's ever a team, it's the Chiefs' explosive offense where you're debating that.
And then
go ahead. What was the other thing you wanted to talk about?
Just the second thing is, I don't want to lean on this too much because, as I've already said, Derek Carr was incredible in that game. Like that I think raises the high watermark of what I thought Derek Carr was capable of. Even going back to like 2016, Derek Carr, when he looked like he was, taking the step to being the next great young quarterback, this was a new high point for him. Like this was an amazing game. But like one of the things we've always said about Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins is there's just something missing about them when you compare them to the great quarterbacks in the NFL, the Mahomes, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, whatever. There's something missing, and it's harder to identify sometimes. You can kind of stumble upon it every now and again in the data where like there's a curve that's supposed to exist based on, situation or whatever.
You love the curve.
Well, forget that specific curve, but generally, right? There are ways that a player is supposed to adapt his play depending on the situation in the game, and those guys don't, right? It just doesn't change. They don't seem to, either they're not aware of the situation or it doesn't permeate to their decision-making process, but it doesn't change how they play the game. And that tends to manifest itself, and I think often at critical situations, which is why like Kirk Cousins, as much as the primetime, number thing is probably a little bit of it's a little bit of a distortion. There's something to it, right? Because when the bright light comes on Kirk Cousins, that's when that curve is supposed to change. And with him, it's just a flat line, and that's why he doesn't come up big in those big moments. There's a similar thing with Carr, and I thought, the broadcast was really interesting yesterday, but I thought they dismissed a little bit too easily the bad interception to end the game. Because it was a really shitty way for that game to end, right? Derek Carr has played one of the best games of the entire season, and then it ends with just this pointless heave into Daniel Sorensen. It wasn't even into coverage. It was just like thrown at him. And he's like, well, he never would have done that accept the situation. It's like, well, all right, the situation was bad, right? You're 28 seconds, you got to go 75 yards. That's not good. On the other hand,
Usually have a couple shots in the middle of the field, though.
right. On the other hand, it's not so bad that you have to just throw up. It wasn't even a prayer. It was just like a gift. Just throw up like you literally just capitulated. You just
Don't
threw the
forget,
game away.
Raiders fans. Sam did say this is one of the best quarterback games he's ever seen to start this thing.
It was a disappointing way for that to end. It feels like there were other things he could have done on that play.
Man, if Aguilar just catches that deep ball, the Chiefs might not even get a shot to make that comeback.
But like if there
That's a bigger issue. Carr was awesome. Yeah, he probably shouldn't have chucked it into coverage in the last one.
There's a difference.
Carr was great, though.
Yeah, there's a difference between 28 seconds and 10 seconds, right? If it's 10 seconds left and you got to go 75 yards, fair enough. You're going to need a prayer somewhere along the line. But 28 seconds, like you can take that in a few chunks that don't require just like, I mean, literally there was no purpose to that throw other than to throw the game away. And even Carr, like they then zoom in on him and he's walking to the sideline with a sort of, what could I do? Like, well, not that. Like, come on.
I don't disagree. The something missing between Carr and Cousins where, I think, look, we talked about it a few weeks ago. John, not to take anything away from Carr last night in particular, but John Gruden had been ranking as one of the top play callers in the league. And we usually do that by saying, okay, how productive has this offense been against how well has the quarterback played on a play-by-play basis? Now, over the last couple weeks, since we've upset every quarterback fan base, but since we've upset the Derek Carr fans, he has played much better the last couple weeks, right? So that's fine. Things offset sometimes. 2 weeks ago in my article, I wrote Carr graded better than his stats. This week, he was spectacular outside of that one throw. There's context. There's also context with the Patrick Mahomes interception thing. He threw one yesterday I don't believe was on him. Demarcus Robinson's running the old corner stop. You run a corner stop, and then you work back down the stem. And he was working more to space. Mahomes has to throw it on time. He threw it to where he thought the receiver was going to be, and it gets intercepted. And I just want to defend PFF really quick. We add context to every last one of those throws for every quarterback, all 600 or 700 per season. And sometimes, early in the year, Mahomes has had interception luck, and it's true. And if you were hanging your MVP conversation on 25 touchdowns versus one interception, I'm saying that's false, and it's fake, and it's not why he's in the MVP conversation. Last night, if they had lost the game, he wasn't out of the MVP conversation because he threw a miscommunication interception before the half in the red zone. So there's context on every single throw, and we're right. How's that?
All right. Yeah, remember when I removed the first 3 games of the season to put Deshaun Watson as the number 1 graded quarterback in the NFL?
Yeah.
You know who's number 2?
Derek Carr.
Yes, Derek Carr. So he's number 2 in that stretch with a terrible game against the Browns in a rainstorm. So again, you can, if you want to cherry pick in this way, you could basically say, well, he's been the second best quarterback in the NFL after the first 3 games, and we can probably make
3.
Yeah. And we can probably make him number 1 if you want to excuse the fact that a torrential rainstorm in Cleveland happened.
He's played well, man. Look, that's the thing when you eliminate. That's part of the reason why the perception is so strong. Sometimes Raiders fans have seen everything since week 4, and been like, "Wow, this guy's playing great. He's playing great." And it's true, but the first 3 games counted. And I know one of them was a Saints game where the stats were awesome and we didn't have him graded as well. But I don't know, just feelings and what's actually happening don't always match.
This was another game where you look at it and you say, the Chiefs are just so hard to beat. At one point, deep in the game, it's like Derek Carr is having one of the best games any quarterback has had for years, and they're up by 3, and the Chiefs are likely to have a shot at winning this game. It's so hard to beat them. And also, Demarcus Robinson had one of the worst games I've ever seen from a wide receiver, and they still won the game and put up 35 points. They're just so hard to beat.
I thought it was interesting that the Chiefs came out rolling the pocket almost every pass. I mean, it feels like they're just lulling you to sleep, and then anytime they want this big chunk play, they can go get it. And if they don't, it's you breathe a sigh of relief on the defensive side of the ball. And if there's enough sighs of relief in a given game, you have a shot. And that was the Raiders in this game last night. Chiefs pull it out 35-31. Classic Chiefs battle. I didn't think that the Raiders were going to be able to do that because the Chiefs have been so good at discouraging downfield passes. But the Raiders' offense has created a ton of open throws against this Chiefs defense that has been, pretty stingy otherwise. All right, we've got some other games to discuss. Some are more important than others, Sam.
All right.
So let's go through what we can here. Miami Dolphins, Denver Broncos, and Tua gets benched.
Yeah.
Broncos D plays some good football. I will say the Vic Fangio defense is a tough defense for rookies to go up against. But Tua gets away with an interception that gets negated early, despite a penalty that had nothing to do with it. He was definitely off. He got banged up. It looked like was he getting benched or was it because he got hurt?
Right.
Brian Flores comes out and says Ryan Fitzpatrick was the guy for the moment. Fitz plays just as poorly as Tua, and Denver gets the win.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. It looked like he took a shot low, and he was being pulled out of the game because of injury. But no, Flores comes out and says, no, it was performance. Tua was playing like crap. We put in Fitz, who also played like crap.
It's tough when you don't get special teams scores, right?
Yeah, and this was kind of the downswing of what we've been saying, right? Is that defense have been playing out of its mind. The special teams have been making big plays. At some point, that's going to stop happening. Now, what was intriguing is, this was a game where you would have thought the defense would absolutely murder Drew Lock, and it did a reasonable job, but they got enough going, and then Miami's offense just didn't function.
Lock settled in after he had a rough interception early on as well.
Yeah.
He'll end up with, a mid-tier grade. Lock feels like he's doing just enough to kind of hang around here. Is he doing just enough to hang around for the Broncos?
Well, their problem with him is the same problem it was in the offseason, which is, do they have the security to start over? Can you take another swing at a quarterback and keep going? I know, structurally, institutionally, if you're looking at Denver right now and saying, what do we do at the quarterback position? You say, well, you haven't seen anything from him to say he's the guy, so let's swing again, right? But from a job security standpoint, does anybody in that building have that runway?
Probably not. I don't know, man. Tim Patrick's still awesome. That's all I know.
All the receivers are awesome. You look at that group.
Yeah.
That's their group of playmakers. Now, the offensive line.
But that's the argument against Locke right now.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Their offensive line can improve, and that's definitely something that isn't helping Drew Lock. On the other hand, it's no worse a situation than Joe Burrow, who we'll get to, Justin Herbert, and several other young quarterbacks who are dealing with crappy pass protection situations. But their group of playmakers is insane. Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, Noah Fant, Albert O was making plays. The running backs are good. This is as talented a group of playmakers, honestly, as there is in the league. And Drew Lock is not really rising his game to match that.
All I'm saying is if they had a better quarterback a year from now, Fangio does good things with the defense.
Yeah.
Bring Justin Simmons back, who was an absolute baller yesterday with a couple picks, defensive stops, and coverage. He was awesome.
Great pick.
Get Von Miller back. They have enough pieces on defense plus a decent scheme. You have all those pieces on offense. If you had just an average quarterback, this team is 9-7 capable, right? And then you get a good quarterback in there. If they had Justin Herbert with this group, how would they look? I don't know. Herbert's awesome now. So I think Denver, they were supposed to be kind of sneaky good this year, potentially.
And they're not because Drew Lock?
Yeah, that's it. That's what I think. Plus, weird stuff happens in Denver. So Miami, just like it happens in Miami. No matter what happened with these two teams, weird stuff was going to happen. It's just disappointing for the Dolphins, who were just making a run. And I think the offense let them down here. It wasn't so much the defense. The offense let them down.
Yeah.
As they were trying to make their little playoff push here.
Well, they're now in this tough spot where they we made the switch at quarterback, and it was because we actually do think we get better with Tua, and we want to make this playoff push. Now you're in a spot where, okay, you've now tied yourself to a playoff push and have shown the willingness to sit down any quarterback that isn't playing well.
I think Flores benching Tua tells me that the Tua move was front office generated. So if the front office came, coaches aren't looking to 2021. Coaches are right now in 2020 saying we're going to make a playoff run. I think Flores did not. Now, knowing what we know now, Flores said Fitz gives us the best opportunity to win, and the front office said, we got to figure out what we have in Tua, put him in there. That's just my feeling coming off this, because you don't bench the guy that you made the move for. Like Nick Foles versus Trubisky, Foles is not getting benched because they said we made the move, we're going to live with it, right? It feels like the Dolphins were going to do the same thing. Tua is our guy, we're going to live with it. We know he's a rookie, there'll be some ups and downs. Like, you know what you're getting into with a rookie. I'm thinking because Flores benched him, he always wanted Fitzpatrick because he wanted to make that run. I mean, and that's why it was never communicated to Fitz.
Unless he's just in that like mold of like this is a business. We just make the decisions as they come to us. Yeah. Tua was the best guy. Now he wasn't. But yeah, right, exactly. But now you're stuck in this situation where like you're going to be bouncing between quarterbacks because the second one of these guys starts to play badly, he's getting benched because you're chasing this playoff push that honestly is a year before you have any business being there anyway.
Yeah, but that looks really good for the Dolphins if they, accelerate it, get into the playoffs, have all those draft picks next year.
Right, but like my point is simply what's the benefit, right? Are you not better off just giving Tua the games, the playoff time, because next year you actually expect to be really good and can make the playoffs and win, as opposed to let's start jerking around with the quarterback position, yanking each one of these guys game to game because you're chasing a push that'll just get you waxed by the Chiefs and sent home. Like, what's the point? You know what I mean?
No, I get it. It'll be interesting to watch here and see what happens for next week with the Dolphins. All right, we get the Dallas Cowboys defeating the Minnesota Vikings. I thought the Vikings defense had turned a corner, Sam.
You did.
I thought they had turned a corner.
You did. Turns out you were wrong.
I did text you before this game, said Cousins-Dalton shootout. It started slow, but it kind of got there. Cousins, again, from a within structure and working off of play action, man, he was awesome the entire game until the end when it did feel off when it's like drop back pass, drop back, like when it's just ball is in your hands, move it on your own, go get them, and things just fall apart.
Yeah. I mean, it was the most inevitably Kirk Cousins ending to this game ever. And his numbers are absurd. Like, you look at his stats, like 300 plus yards, right? 3 touchdowns. I've got no plays on, but close to 300 yards if he didn't top him.
Okay.
Yeah, it did. 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, passer rating of 140, yards per attempt of 10.5. You look at this game, you're like, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are basically open every snap, right?
Yeah.
And you have Dalvin Cook, and Kirk Cousins can hit those guys. Why is the Vikings offense the way it is? Why is this not one of the best offenses in the NFL, regardless of the fact the offensive line isn't great? They just should be so much better with the personnel they have. But it's a lot like the Derek Carr thing, right? There's just something missing with Kirk Cousins. And it's not a good like drive to sort of hang the hat on of Kirk Cousins' failings, because that game, like the chance to answer the drive, right? Dallas go down, they score, they win on this touchdown blown coverage from the Vikings. They take the lead. Now it's like, right, 90 seconds, Kirk Cousins gets his chance to be Patrick Mahomes, right? You're like, well, that's only going one way. But you had, check down and then drop pass from Justin Jefferson, dials up his drop at the worst time, and like a really bad, defensive pass interference that didn't get called that would have helped them out, right? And then you get the final heave on 4th down that was just a prayer. Again, like a Derek Carrian prayer, which, sure, the receiver stopped his route. On the other hand, that was a terrible, that was never going anywhere anyway. And so inevitably it peters out. It's like most of that drive was not Kirk Cousins' fault.
Cowboys dropped it too, just to, save the passer rating. Kirk made sure his passer rating stayed intact.
Like, most of that drive was not Kirk Cousins' fault. On the other hand, there was an inevitability at the outcome that with the ball in Kirk Cousins' hands with 90 seconds left, there was just no way it was happening.
Kirk he has a passing grade of 89.7 when using play action, and that drops to 65 with no play action. I mean, I think that's the bottom line. You mentioned Carr. With Cousins, with Carr, with, say, a Tannehill. You can get them so far. They're all middle-tier quarterbacks. Carr's playing great. I think the body of work that we've seen from Derek Carr in his career is he's a middle-tier quarterback. This is not a knock. It means you're somewhere between like 11 and 20 or whatever that range is, 8 to 20. And if everything else around you is great, we can get you so far. You can get Cousins so far. You could probably get Carr so far. We could get Tannehill so far. And there'll be bouts of play where they look great and they look elite and all that stuff. But there's a certain element of your environment is really dictating their outcomes. But once the environment becomes a little bit less than stellar, it is far more difficult for them to succeed and rise to the occasion. This game in a microcosm.
Yeah.
Microcosm in this game.
Here's a really fun one, right? You know, the way, for some reason, this is the day where we're just, if you remove X games from a player's statistics, he's the best graded guy ever.
This day. Yeah,
I know. Let's roll with it. This is the theme today, right? You know the way Kirk Cousins has a stinker in week 2 every season against Green Bay?
Oh, yeah.
If you remove week 2 from the NFL, if week 2 in the last 2 seasons never existed, Kirk Cousins is the number 1 graded quarterback in the NFL since the start of the 2019 season.
What?
Yep.
Well, he's got some garbage time. And that's the other thing, too. Mr. Fourth Quarter, Kirk Cousins, all those stats that keep putting out there.
Sure.
Garbage time.
Right. Even if you stripped out garbage time, he would be right up there with Mahomes and Russell Wilson. But unlike those two guys, where when the chips are down late in the game, fourth quarter, do or die time, 90 seconds left, win the game, you've got a reasonable degree of confidence that Russ and Mahomes are going to get that done. Nobody has any confidence that Russell Wilson gets that done.
But I mean,
that Kirk Cousins gets that done.
Cousins is Matt Schaub in Schaub's system. I mean, in the Kubiak system, Matt Schaub. If you look at all-time stats, Schaub is up there in a lot of different things, and he was in a Kubiak Shanahan system with an Andre Johnson and all that stuff, right? With an Owen Daniels, he played reasonably well. He was good. He executed the system. He was a passenger in an incredible system that he executed well. But if you chose to say, Matt, it's your game today. The thing I wanted the Titans to do with Tannehill a few weeks ago, maybe I was wrong. Maybe you never should do that. Go win it, Tannehill. Go win it, Schaub. Go win it, Cousins. Ball's in your hand 40, 45 times. We're going to run play action and all that stuff, but we're not trying to run the ball a whole lot. That's your game. You're just probably not going to do that.
Kirk is second if you eliminate fourth quarter in the last 2 years. So it's not just garbage time.
With those disastrous games.
As long as you eliminate week 2. As long as he never has to play in week 2. Maybe the Vikings should think about having a week 2 quarterback just to not put Kirk out there for those games.
Wow. Well, Dallas saving their season, man.
Dude, they're right in the thick of it now for the NFC East. 3 wins, which is tied for like second in the division with everybody else, all half a game back from the wretched Philadelphia Eagles. And I love the NFC East this year.
We got to go rapid fire through some of these other games here, Samuel.
What do you got?
Jets and Chargers.
Ugh.
Justin Herbert was awesome. We'll talk more about it in the preview show. Herbert was awesome, man.
Yeah.
The arm talent and look, it's the Jets defense. A lot of open throws there, but you just saw all of the touch and the zip that Herbert's bringing from an arm talent standpoint was tough to defend.
And the Chargers desperately tried to charger this game away. Like they had it wrapped up. And then suddenly it's like the Jets have the ball within a score late in the game. This is actually going to happen again to Justin Herbert against the Jets. Thankfully it didn't, though.
Flacco with a really rough pick 6 early on, but he started chucking. It was old school Flacco, at least trying to chuck it down the field. It wasn't check down Flacco.
Right. And, dude, the Jets, when they have their entire receiving core healthy, which basically has been last week and this week, they aren't terrible on offense. Like, that's a group. At the very minimum, you can look at that and say that's a group we can build around. And, again, like Mekhi Becton gets injured again. Like, he might need to be shut down for the season just to get him healthy next year and build. But my point is, if you're looking for like rays of light for the Jets going forward, at the end of the tunnel, that receiving core with a Mekhi Becton, whether it's not Sam Darnold, with a Trevor Lawrence, a quarterback, like there are things to look at and say, all right, there's some optimism here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And they've got more draft capital and, a chance to rebuild. So, Trevor Lawrence didn't get to play because Florida State backed out, Sam. They backed out this weekend. Chargers win. How about that? Eagles at the Browns. Look at these poor Browns playing all these weather games like crazy.
Right. It's like the only team in the NFL that's affected or afflicted. Right?
It works both. It works both ways here. It's tough on the passing game offensively. The Browns defense looks like they've turned a corner the last 3 weeks. They've played in hail, in thunderstorms, in wind, and every last bit.
They are set up very well to thrive in those conditions, right? In terms of like this offense wants to do that anyway. So suddenly when that becomes the ideal game plan, it's perfect. Like Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt just running riot, the offensive line mauling people at the line of scrimmage. Baker Mayfield, placed in a small glass box that says break here in case of passing emergency. Like, just that's the Browns offense right now, and it functions. Like, Baker, played okay, but we really haven't seen yet any suggestion that this, like, he's turning a corner at any point.
Yeah, a few really nice throws, but it's still, if we're going to talk Cousins and the scheme, that's what the Browns are running, and, it creates some open throws, create some downfield opportunities. Nick Chubb ran the ball most efficiently for the Browns. I really liked Kareem Hunt's touchdown run, though. Like he averaged like a 1.5 per carry, but that touchdown run was absolutely fantastic. Eagles, I expected their offense to turn a corner at some point.
Wentz looks broken again. He fixed himself for like a 3-game stretch, and now he's back to being the guy that just can't play.
He's just seeing the field a little bit slowly, I think. And a lot of those sacks are just like, it's just slow. It's really just slow. Throwing the ball wasn't too bad. Had a little bit of bad luck in there too, but everything just feels off for this Eagles offense. And
first place Eagles offense.
First place Eagles.
What are they? 3-6-1, leading the division, currently hosting a playoff game.
Yeah,
and half a game back from the Rams.
I don't even know. Do they even feel like they could be dangerous at any point?
No.
At one point, it felt like, well, if they get guys back, they could be dangerous.
Here's the thing, right? Somebody is going to win the NFC East and host a playoff game. Of those teams, Philadelphia, I think, has maybe not the least, but I don't think Philadelphia has any chance of causing
They're still better than the Giants and WFT.
I could see the Giants upsetting a team in optimal, ridiculous circumstances in the playoffs. I can see no chance of Philadelphia doing that right now
because of Daniel Jones' variability.
Yeah. And they've got some skills. Eagles right now have nothing.
Credit the Browns defense either way. Denzel Ward, playing pretty well. He's playing awesome. The one thing, I don't love the Browns secondary, but having that baseline of Denzel Ward does help quite a bit. He graded well yesterday. Let's go to Cincinnati Bengals and the Washington football team. Rest in peace, Joe Burrow.
Damn it.
Before he even had his knee torn to bits, he had other plays where you like cringeworthy, I can't believe you took those hits type of plays. We talked about it all year. Is this offensive line going to break him? And maybe it did. Well,
yeah, it did. It's sad. I mean, I think this was a concerningly high possible outcome of his season. Dude's just been under a wealth of pressure all season long. I mean, I was telling you, like, the right side of their offensive line was Quinton Spain at right guard and Adeniji at right tackle, which had played together in the past despite being new additions to the team. I think last week that was the left side of their offensive line. Like, this line is not only has it been terrible, but it's been in a constant state of flux and chopping and changing, and just it's a nightmare for him. So,
and of all that, Michael Jordan's the guy who just got absolutely wrecked for 9 pressures. Like 50 dropbacks.
I don't want to go all galaxy brain on this, but let's hope for his sake it's a relatively clean, just an ACL tear, and then he can just get back for next year, right? They'll presumably spend an offseason trying to build some kind of protection in front of him, and for his sake, he gets to avoid the next 6-7 weeks of developing any bad habits behind that offensive line. Just punt this season and start over.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. There was a point where number 2 overall pick Chase Young popped Joe Burrow, number 1 overall pick. Burrow's helmet was off
for the fumble.
It was ripped. Yeah, there was the fumble on that Chase Young forced on him. There was another play where Burrow had his helmet ripped off, and then Chase Young had to very carefully sack him, and the play should have had to be stopped and all that stuff. So Burrow was already getting crushed. Alex Smith with a very Alex Smithian game, just under control. I mean, he put up the the Lamar Jackson stat line.
Yeah.
The same exact thing.
Also,
with
notice the
turnover
Alex Smith stat line before that. Yeah.
Pretty much the same thing. So a safe effort for the Washington football team, and hope that Joe Burrow's knee is not too broken. So the last two games, we got the Detroit Lions and the Carolina Panthers, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Steelers took care of business against the Jags.
Expectedly.
Really don't have much to add here other than Jake Luton. Again, it felt like the Jags used all their upset juice. Like, Jake Luton was playing above his skis for a couple weeks, and then he ran to the Steelers D.
Yes, and that really was it, right? This is one of those games. Sometimes you look at your predictions during the course of a Sunday, right? And it's like, well, I got these ones right, I got this one wrong. This is one of those games that went exactly the way it was supposed to, right? Pittsburgh's defense, the number one pressure defense we've ever seen, going up against Jake Luton, who has been biblically bad against pressure. Heading into this game, he had a passer rating of 0.8 under pressure, right? Okay, that's probably going to regress back to like human levels, but the point is, this is a guy that's been a nightmare under pressure, and he's facing a team that will pressure him more than anybody else. That in and of itself should end this game, and it did.
Yeah. So that was a beatdown. And then the Detroit Lions got shut out against the Panthers.
Wow. All right, let me first start by saying P.J. Walker was better in this game than I thought he could be, and he still wasn't very good. He was good enough to beat the Lions. He showed more than I thought he was capable of. People probably need to dial back this idea that you should bench Teddy for him because he wasn't
Who's
that good.
pulling up that idea?
There's a lot of Panthers fans saying that at the moment.
All I'm saying is, in games in which P.J. Walker has started, the Panthers are not only 1-0, but they haven't given up a point. And credit P.J. for that.
This is true, yeah.
You got to give credit to,
those
to P.J.
those red zone interceptions he was throwing are a big help.
Yeah, man. He played fine. Couple big time throws, a corner route for a touchdown, sweet. The Lions are just extremely disappointing.
The Bucs put up 46 points against this team a week ago, and Detroit couldn't score.
It should have been 60 points a week ago.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not big on like calling for people to be fired, but there's going to be some difficult conversations in that building coming out of this game. Like, how can you not score a point against this team? And how did you let P.J. Walker carve up your defense?
So I think the big thing in Detroit here, what do they even look like next year? Their entire receiving core, they're all free agents. From Kenny Golladay to Marvin Jones to Danny Amendola. So this part of what I liked about them was that trio plus Hawkinson with Stafford. The trio is all free agents. Lions probably going to have a top 10 pick. Are they going to be, looking at Zach Wilson? Are they looking for the next quarterback? Should they have drafted Tua or Herbert earlier last year instead of Jeffrey Okudah? I feel like the pieces are there in Detroit, but, man, it might look completely different next year.
Yeah, and you have that Matthew Stafford referendum. Like, is he even the quarterback that's part of this future? The defense is a total mess right now. You've got this collection of guys that are supposedly assembled to play this ridiculously heavy man coverage system, which only this coaching tree runs in the NFL. So the second this coaching tree is no longer running things, everybody you've assembled on defense is no longer a good fit necessarily for what you're trying to do. Like, the Lions have gone from being a sneaky playoff outside dark horse contender this season to, wow, this thing needs to be like rebuilt from a fairly small foundation stone.
Yeah, not to overreact, but next year the team could look completely different.
Yeah.
Both sides of the ball. I do want to give some credit to the Panthers, guys like Jeremy Chin and Rasul Douglas and just some of their young guys, Troy Pride, like whenever they were out there, Corn Elder, they got contributions from a whole bunch of different guys who have overall had, the defense has had a rough season. They went from overachievers to achievers. Yeah. And they did play well yesterday, but man, a rough one for the Lions, 20-0 Panthers.
Walker did make some nice throws though too. As much as I think like let's pump the brakes on the PJ Walker hype. He made some nice throws.
He's no Teddy.
Of course not. How could you be?
That's like your nightmare. Teddy versus PJ Walker, and Walker actually getting some starting hype here.
What a competition.
You love
what
Teddy.
A competition.
All right, guys, that'll do it. We made through. Look, we had to get through.
We got hard out at 9 o'clock, so unfortunately,
we gave everybody love.
Yeah,
we gave everybody love.
Last few games, little tight.
It is the point of the season where some storylines are more important than others. Okay? And that's what we focused on. So we appreciate everybody tuning in. It's Thanksgiving week. Always exciting. Very thankful
What
this
are our
week.
plans?
I think we're gonna drop the pod. I know we're recording earlier.
Okay.
And we'll have to drop it earlier too because there's Thursday games. So we're gonna try to review all the games. We're gonna record on Wednesday. And I think we'll just get it right up Wednesday afternoon, evening.
Okay.
Under promise, over deliver. So Wednesday evening.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
And you guys are gonna listen if you do drive to Thanksgiving, if you're allowed out of your house. If not, you're just gonna listen to it, whatever it is. So we'll be back previewing all of the Week 12 action later this week. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.